we had this discussion the other night on the wrap-up show. We are very much aligned in terms of how we feel the finish to the Indy 500 went and how race control called that. But you and I don't live in an echo chamber. We want to hear different opinions and different points of view. And a good friend of the show, Matthew Owens, who frequently is in our chat room through his Behind the Mic account, he was calling the race for USRN. And shortly after the finish, he tweeted this, saying that is why you do whatever you can to preserve a green flag finish at the Indianapolis 500. And because I want to be challenged, I want to hear different perspectives, and I want to have this debate and this discussion with somebody that I trust and know will keep things respectful and do a very good job of presenting the opposition and the other side of things here in that point of view. Matthew Owens very graciously has offered to take some time from his vacation in France tonight to join us on Grid Live Encore, and he joins us now. Matthew, great to see you. Thank you so much for doing this. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, great. Thank you, guys. As always, I am glad to be with you. And I just don't understand if you didn't like the finish, why you continued to watch. I don't know why you just didn't stop watching. Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
That's what I've been telling him.
All right, go ahead. All right, never mind. You're off. We're not doing this.
Come out.
No, Matthew, in all seriousness, thank you so much. And I'm just going to give you the floor. Just go, my man. Why do you feel that the Indianapolis 500 should be a green flag finish no matter what? Why do you think that our mentality is a little bit wrong here, to be quite frank?
Okay, so obviously respect everyone's opinions, especially you two. The way I look at it is as someone that counts down to the day of the Indianapolis 500, basically from the day it ends to the day it gets back. And I know there's plenty of people, I'm not unique in that. There's a lot of people that do that as well. Their life centers around the Indianapolis 500, and there were 330 plus thousand people there. I just think for all of those people that you jam into the arena and the millions others watching around the world, I think you've got to do whatever you can to preserve a green flag finish. Now, that's not to say that it needs to happen, whatever by whatever means. Because I totally get your point. It's 500 miles. I think that distance should stay set. We shouldn't be going to overtime. I did get that. I don't believe that. But I think that when you're a race fan, especially a fan of this race, and you do whatever you've done to either watch the race or especially get in to the racetrack itself, I think that's something, if you can, as best you can, guarantee a green flag finish, I think you need to. And I think they did everything right, in my mind, on Sunday. I'll say this too about it. I get the feeling we had 2 red flags. I get the kind of feeling that they were ready to be done with it. They would have ended it under yellow and not thrown that 3rd red flag if we didn't have the 3 cars side by side on that restart accident. I think that kind of put them into a box and said, I don't know if we want to end this race going back. I mean, that's 2002 Elio Castroneves and Paul Tracy on steroids, on when do we freeze the field and who was in front, and we're 3 wide and we haven't even really taken the green flag yet. So I get the feeling they were ready to end it under yellow had it not been for that scenario.
First of all, Matthew, this is my first time getting to actually talk to you. I'm
a
huge fan of yours, so hello.
Thank you.
I did try to say hello to you earlier, but we had some technical problems backstage.
When do we not?
Yeah, we're all right. But I completely hear your words here, and the idea that all these people have come here for this finish, and it's really great when they get it. I mean, thankfully I've been there for 2 of these green flag finishes, 2019 and 2021, and I'm glad in retrospect that they were green and not yellow. Just the part where it still clangs in my noggin is going back to the Aaron Bearden tweet that we saw, where like I really wish there was some sort of rule set by IndyCar, and it wasn't just a judgment call every single year. And the same as you, I hold the Indy 500 at a very, very high regard. Love that race, and it's one of the best parts of the year. But I still can't wrap my mind around the inconsistency of it all, and it just irks me that this. And we've talked about on this show that it's kind of a culture shift kind of thing, not just in sports, but every form of entertainment, where entertainment is trying to creep itself over, and Game 7 moments are trying to creep themselves over into every facet of human existence. Of just, we need that gratification of the good stuff, every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if any of that makes sense, but
no, I think it makes perfect sense, and I guess a lot of it, there's a very fine line, clearly, to what is acceptable, and I get it. You have to stay within a certain box of rules, right? And I'm with you. I would like a rule to be a little bit more consistent. I was talking about this with some friends earlier today, and not just the 500. Does IndyCar need to come up with a rule and say, we will not red flag it if there's a caution after a certain point? And I'm thinking 98% of the race. Is that the number you want to put it? At Indy, that would be lap 196. So if there's a caution at or after lap 196, we're not going to red flag it. And what happens, happens. I don't know. That's kind of, sort of, a rule that NASCAR used to have. If you remember, before green, white checkers were brought up in 2004, they had a red flag lap. I don't know if that's something everybody would be playing with the same set of rules then, right? And I think that would be something that I think I was going to say everybody would love, but of course everybody doesn't agree on anything these days. But I think a lot of people would like that. I'll also say too, and I don't know if this directly or indirectly impacted their decision making on Sunday, but a lot of people were disappointed not getting a green finish at Texas earlier this year, and what was a phenomenal race. And we were probably going to get one of those classic Texas photo finishes, and we didn't get it because Romain Grosjean crashed with, 2 or 3 to go. Nothing you could really do in that situation, because I think it was with 2 to go. Nothing you could really do in that situation at Texas, because if you try to throw a red flag, you would come down pit road, you'd cross the timing line, we'd be at 1 to go, and there'd be no point to it. But I think that did leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, that we got such a great race, but kind of a flat finish. Well, not kind of, a flat finish. I think a lot of people feel that a finish under yellow is flat, especially when you get a great race like that. If you get a race that someone leads 90% of, and it's kind of a boring race, I don't know if people really care if it finishes under yellow. But what did we have on Sunday? Like 52 lead changes? I think we all wanted to see a green finish there. But I'm with you. I think a consistent rule would be nice to have in that situation. I'll also say this too. 1997, the 597, I think had something similar to this, but a little bit more egregious. Tony Stewart hit the wall coming out of turn 4, coming to 2 laps to go. They were very quick on the yellow trigger. I'm not sure if that really warranted a caution, but they did bring out the caution for his brush of the wall. And they made less than a full lap under caution, and then threw the green and white together with kind of a lot of confusion. Arie Luyendyk was the leader, went on to win that race. Don't know if he really knew what was going on. There were still yellow lights on the back stretch, even though they had thrown the green with the white. I think Sunday was much more
no doubt.
What's the word I'm looking for? I think it was much more comfortable than that. That was out of control in 97. I think it was a little bit better than that. And I also say this, just to finish up that point. The Indianapolis 500 is not equal to any other race in the world. And I'm talking any NASCAR race, any Formula One race, or anything. And I think the Indianapolis 500 stands alone on its own island of the greatest race in the world. So I don't mind if things get judged or officiated differently. in the Indy 500. I don't know if that opens up a can of worms for you guys or everyone else, but I think the Indy 500 stands alone, and whatever you can do to please as many people as you can, especially the people that spent hard-earned money to get into that racetrack that day, you try to please them.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a place where anything can happen and dreams come true. I mean, Graham Rahal in a Chevrolet, that seemed impossible, and then lo and behold, there it was. So, I mean.
Yeah, well, guys, I totally get that side of the argument as well. And I think that you're absolutely right. This was much better officiated than 97. I think that's a very low bar to have to clear, but and I think better than 02 as well, because there's no debate. I mean, Paul Tracy will still tell you to this day there's a part of him that thinks he won that race. There is no debate in terms of who won the race Sunday, and there hasn't been any debate on this show here. We've all given our props and congratulations to Joseph Newgarden, thoroughly deserving winner, just as Marcus Ericsson would have been this year and was last year. So there's no argument there. My thing is, and Matthew, you bring up another good point as well, with how this race is officiated relative to other races all around the world, and this being, even though it has so much prestige, it is part of a championship that takes place throughout the season that used to award double points, now only awards single race points again. So I don't know how I would feel about calling it differently than we would other IndyCar races. But I think my biggest thing is not even the booth seemed to know what was going to happen there at the end there.
Yeah.
And I said this on wrap up, whenever it was on Sunday. I said that on my my Instagram live that I did. The first red flag that was thrown of the 3, absolutely, I don't think there's anybody making an argument there. You had a very scary situation with Tyler going over the catch fence, Kyle Kirkwood getting upside down. That was one where I think red flags are justifiable for safety reasons. And the track at that moment was unsafe. You had a driver trapped in a car upside down. You had a question as to where that tire landed. Absolutely throw the red flag there. The second red flag, to me, it goes along the lines of what we saw last year when Jimmy Johnson crashed in 2014. I think was the first time that I can remember them really throwing a late red flag for a crash that probably didn't need it. But I said, you know what, if you want to try to get a green flag finish, that's the one attempt you're going to make, then I'll take it. I understand the perspective that a green flag finish is more entertaining. It gives more drivers a shot at making a late move. We can go ahead and do that. It was the third red flag on Sunday that I felt, when you red flag it with 2 to go, and normally the procedure is you get a full warm-up lap, and then you take the green flag, and you have less than 2 laps to go once you cross the line. There's not enough time to do the warm-up lap, and you're going to have a 1-lap shootout. That, to me, really bordered on the line of, this seems like an egregious sort of crapshoot here that we're bringing one of the most prestigious races, arguably the most prestigious races, you mentioned, Matthew, in the world, into a situation that, do we really want these guys going 240 miles an hour all for broke here with 1 lap in a NASCAR-style green/white checker, I guess, in this scenario, sort of situation, not overtime, obviously, because at the bare minimum, it still ended at 500 miles, and I will take that any day over the Daytona 500 becoming the Daytona 530. But again, if you watch this show, you know how I feel. So I would like to see, if we're going to continue to do this, I think, and I don't think we disagree here at all. I think there needs to be some sort of precedent set and some sort of mark made in the rule book so that we know going forward, this is going to be the procedure. Should we get a late race caution, here's what we're going to do. And if the caution comes out on the white flag lap, obviously, or with 2 to go, maybe even with 3 to go, there's not enough time, then we ended under yellow. Otherwise, we'll see if we can give the fans a green flag finish here, because that's what they came for. That's what they expected. But again, like you mentioned, Matthew, I don't think, you talk about putting 300,000, 350,000 people into the speedway. There's no one size fits all solution that every single one of them 100% are going to agree on in terms of how we should best officiate those races. And I think that's important to keep in mind as well. So where can we find that balance of giving the fans maximum entertainment possible while also upholding the integrity of the sport? I think that's the challenge that we need to consider going forward here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would also say Marcus Ericsson has every reason to feel a little robbed here, as he kind of stated in that interview. He has every reason to be upset about this because, as we know, the aerodynamic package now. The leader on these restarts at Indianapolis is a total sitting duck. I thought he restarted it perfectly. Everyone had been waiting until as late as possible to go on those late restarts. He went in the short shoot, and I thought, that's brilliant. Try to catch him off guard, which he did. But even still, that didn't work. He has every reason to be upset. At the same time, we have every reason to also look at that and say, boy, we're a fan of a sanctioning body that put the fans first in that. And I love that. I really do love that they try their absolute best to give us what we want. I'll say this too, and I understand the argument of we don't want overtime or we don't want one lap dashes in IndyCar at Indianapolis because, huge crashes can happen. I will also say we had one of the worst crashes I've seen in a long time with 16 to go, but we didn't in a one lap dash. Ultimately, it's up to these drivers to self-police themselves. That's a hard thing to do with an Indianapolis 500 on the line. I know. Pato O'Ward, was it with 8? Was it with 8 to go? He pulled out a last lap move with 8 laps to go. He was in no way did he have to make that pass in that corner or on that lap to have a chance to win. And as Matt White said on our broadcast, everyone was given a deck of cards to build a house with, and he took his cards, ripped them up, and threw them on the ground with that move, which he did. So I get the point of, do we want 1 or 2 lap dashes because it could cause a big crash? It could, but in this instance, we had big crashes with 8 and 16 to go, but not with 1.
Yeah, and that's a fair point as well, because we know that this is a dangerous sport, and sometimes it's a mechanical issue that causes a driver to lose control, and then there's nothing. I mean, you can drive as carefully as you want. There's nothing you can do about that, and that can happen on every lap. The point that I made on the wrap-up show as well, and I'd be interested to actually get your thoughts on this, Matthew, as well here. I felt like I was reminded of the controversy when Robert Wickens had his accident at Pocono, and drivers were saying, and fans were saying as well, we're too much on top of each other on these restarts here. The leader's backing the field up too much, and I think when the cars are closer together, it exponentially raises the opportunity for a crash, as we saw on the front stretch with whatever it was 4 to go, I think, that ultimately caused the third and final red flag to come out. I would certainly be in favor of staggering the cars a little bit more so that there was more distance between them, especially on these restarts here late in the race, so that you give the drivers an opportunity. I said it on the wrap-up show, help the drivers help themselves. I think that that's something that IndyCar could potentially look at as well. Of course, I don't know how the drivers would feel about that in the moment, having a little bit more distance between each of the next few cars because there's only a handful of laps left. But what are your thoughts on that and the restart procedure? And does that play a role potentially in the danger that we see on these final laps?
Maybe it does, but it's interesting you bring that up because there's another topic that we're going to talk about here in a minute where I think I could bring this up. These are grown men and women racing these cars, given the responsibility of racing these very dangerous race cars. They should know how to police themselves. They should know how to make smart decisions for themselves. And they really, if they are professional race drivers, which they are, they should not need anybody in the sanctioning body stepping in and telling them how to race the race cars. That's how I feel about it. Again, I thought we had some strange restarts. We had Pato get one called off because he was trying to, again, play those games. When he was the leader, he knew he was a sitting duck, so he was trying to play some games, got one waved off. That's something else we brought up on Sunday, too, was do we need a restart line in the middle of the short shoot between turns 3 and 4 and say you've got to go by then? Because they were waiting a long time to get going, and that ultimately is what caused the crash that brought out that third yellow flag. Maybe that does need to be looked at, but if you're trying to create space between cars for a restart, I don't know how you're going to police that, especially in the final laps of the Indy 500.
Yeah, I was also thinking about how Ericsson, or Pato's just claiming that he got squeezed by Ericsson, and so we've got that whole thing to worry about too after this event.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about Pato as well. That was certainly a move that did not have to be made. I mean, that's a last lap move going for the win. That I would understand. With 8 laps to go, I think he probably should have been a little bit smarter in that situation there.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe he should have. But again, we're trying to put ourselves in that position, and it's hard to do that, especially in that spot. But I just ultimately I believe that what happened was eventually for the best. We got a deserving winner. We didn't have the top 7 pile into each other in turn 1, and we didn't have the guy running 8th magically, click his heels, and all of a sudden he's in Indy victory lane. I think it turned out pretty well. I also think this is an outlier. Now, maybe I'm proven wrong and we have this happen 6 more times over the next 12 years. I don't know. But I think this is kind of an outlier on how the Indianapolis 500 is going to finish.
Yeah, well, It's important to remember just 2 years ago, we had one of the cleanest 500s in history. I think we only had 2 cautions all day, and it still ended up being a thrilling battle between Elio Castroneves and Alex Palou, and of course, legendary history being made with Elio tying the record for most 500s won in a single career. Brandon, do you want to respond to that, and then maybe we can transition over to NASCAR here?
Yeah, with the 2021 Indy 500, I was surprised. I was there, and I couldn't believe how quickly it was going. It was just amazing to see that we could actually escape carnage like that. And I think that is definitely going to be one of the outliers in the next 20 years. It definitely will be interesting to see. Like you said, Matthew, I guess only time really is going to tell as we go 10 more Indy 500s, whether this will end up being an outlier or maybe it'll, unfortunately, what if this becomes something that race control tends to lean towards, especially after they've seen this 500. I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, well, I think one thing we can all agree on is that as long as it doesn't turn into what we saw at the IMS Road Course of a NASCAR Cup Series the last 2 years, I think we have something good on our hands that we can, take some peace and comfort in that it turned out okay. But
they're going the wrong way.
Yes,
you want to get me started on that one?
Well, we will transition here to NASCAR in just a moment, but like I said, Matthew, thank you so much for giving your thoughts on that, because I think it's important for us to have this conversation, because it's one that certainly has divided the fans over the last 48 hours here as we continue to react to the finish of the race. And again, I want to move on here because we're already coming up on half an hour, I see, but people were talking about Newgarden weaving down the front stretch, and it looked like if you take a still image, he's coming into the pits, and that maybe something that needs to be policed, because if somebody runs head on into the attenuator at 230 miles an hour, I mean, that's not going to end well, but that's maybe a discussion for another time. And again, we've got almost a full year before we come back to the Speedway for the 2024 Indianapolis 500. So plenty of time to continue to have these discussions and maybe see what might change or what might stay the same going forward.